I drove back to Briar Glen expecting the suffocating weight of grief. Not a legal ambush. At 33, I thought I understood loss. But standing in that mahogany-paneled courtroom while my sister's lawyer painted me as unstable, I realized I knew nothing. Miranda didn't just want the estate. She wanted to rewrite history to get it. I came home to bury my father, but I was about to go to war for him. The windshield wipers on my sedan slapped back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the freezing drizzle that coated the Massachusetts coast. Briar Glen looked exactly as I had left it 3 years ago, yet entirely different. The geography was the same, the jagged line of granite cliffs, the salt-weathered shingles of the storefronts, the narrow roads that wound through ancient oaks, but the color seemed to have been drained out of it, or maybe the gray was just in me. I was 33 years old, and I was an orphan. The word felt heavy and jagged in my throat, like a stone I had swallowed and could not digest. My father, Arthur Morris, was gone. A massive stroke. The coroner had said, quick, painless, the kind of death people say they want until it happens to someone they love. And then they realize that quick just means there is no time to say goodbye, no time to ask the questions that have been sitting on the shelf for a decade, and no time to apologize for not coming home enough. I pulled into the parking lot of Harridan and Cole probate offices. The building was a brick colonial that had probably been a lawyer's office since the whaling days. My hands were shaking as I turned off the ignition. I gripped the steering wheel, taking a breath that rattled in my chest. The guilt was a physical weight. I had stayed in Chicago for Christmas. I had been too busy with my graphic design contracts to fly back for his birthday in March. I had called. Of course. We spoke every Sunday. But voice over a wire is not the same as sitting on the porch, watching the tide come in. I had assumed there was always next month. Next month had run out. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes were red-rimmed, my skin pale against my dark hair. I looked like I was barely holding it together, which was the absolute worst way to look in front of my sister. Miranda would be there. Miranda, who never had a hair out of place. Miranda, who managed crisis with the same cool efficiency she used to manage her investment portfolio. She had handled the funeral arrangements with a terrifying competence, selecting the casket and the flowers as if she were ordering office supplies. I had spent the service crying into a tissue. She had spent it shaking hands and nodding solemnly at the town council members. I opened the car door and stepped into the cold mist. Inside, the office smelled of furniture polish and old dust. The receptionist, a woman named Beverly, who had known us since we were children, gave me a sympathetic nod and pointed toward the conference room. "Go on in." "Haley," she said softly, "Mr. Cole is ready." I walked down the hallway, the floorboards creaking under my boots. I pushed open the heavy oak door. The conference room was dominated by a long mahogany table. At the head sat Mr. Cole, my father's attorney for 40 years. He looked older than I remembered, his skin like crumpled parchment, and there sat Miranda. She was checking something on her phone, her thumbs scrolling rapidly. She wore a tailored black suit that probably cost more than my car, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She didn't look up when I entered. "You are late," she said to the screen. I looked at the grandfather clock in the corner. It was 2 minutes past 10. "The weather is bad," I said, pulling out the chair opposite her. She finally looked at me. Her eyes were the same blue as mine, but where mine felt watery and tired, hers were like chipped ice. "The weather is always bad here. Haley, that is why people leave early, Mr. Cole cleared his throat, shuffling a stack of papers. "Now that we are all here," he said, his voice gravelly and slow, "let us begin." Arthur was a meticulous man. He updated his will several times over the years, but the document before me is the final version. Executed 6 months ago. 6 months ago? Miranda's head snapped up. I thought the last update was in 2019. Mr. Cole adjusted his spectacles. No, he came in privately in August. He was quite specific about these changes. I felt a flicker of surprise. August. I had been in Chicago. Dad hadn't mentioned seeing a lawyer. He had just talked about the garden and how the transmission on his truck was acting up. Mr. Cole began to read. The legalese washed over me, a drone of herebys and therefores, until he reached the distribution of assets. To my daughter, Miranda Morris, I leave the sum of $250,000, along with the deed to the condominium in Boston, which was previously titled to the estate. Miranda stiffened. 250? That is it? Mr. Cole held up a hand. Please, let me finish. He turned the page. To my daughter, Haley Morris, I leave the family homestead at 44 Briar Lane, all personal contents therein, and my controlling shares in the Morris Coastal Trust, which manages the rental properties and land holdings in Briar Glen. The room went silent. The silence was thick, pressing against my eardrums. The Morris Coastal Trust wasn't just a few rental cottages. It included the marina land, the old warehouse district that was slowly being gentrified, and the acres of undeveloped woods bordering the state park. It was the heart of our father's legacy. It was valuable, complicated, and heavy with responsibility. Miranda stood up slowly. Her movements were fluid, predatory. That is a mistake, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried a razor edge. It is not a mistake, mister, Cole said firmly. I drafted it myself. Arthur was clear. He wanted Haley to have the home and the land. He felt you were established. Miranda, you have your own wealth. Haley has always been more connected to the town. Connected? Miranda let out a short, sharp laugh. She lives in Chicago. Arthur, she designs websites. She does not know the first thing about property management or land trusts. I found my voice. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. Dad talked to me about the properties. I said, we talked about them all the time. He knew I wanted to come back eventually. Miranda turned her cold gaze on me. Eventually? You came back because he died. Haley, you were not here when he was forgetting his medication. You were not here when he was getting confused about the accounts. He wasn't confused, I said, though a seed of doubt planted itself in my stomach. Dad had seemed sharp on the phone, tired, maybe, but sharp. Miranda turned back to Mr. Cole. My father was not in his right mind in August. He was vulnerable, and it is clear that someone took advantage of that. She didn't point at me, but she didn't have to. The accusation hung in the air between us. Mr. Cole sighed. Arthur was perfectly lucid. Miranda, we have video of the signing, which is standard procedure. He knew exactly what he was doing. Miranda gathered her purse. She didn't look at the papers. She looked at me, and for a second, I saw something behind the ice. A flash of pure, white-hot rage. This is not over, she said. I will not let you ruin what he built just because you need a safety net. You have always needed rescuing. Haley, but I'm not rescuing you this time. She walked out. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat there, stunned. The victory of inheriting the house, the place where I grew up, the place I loved more than anywhere on earth, felt like ash, mister. Cole took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. She will challenge it. Haley, you know that. I nodded. I know. He pushed a heavy envelope across the table. Here are the keys, and the initial documents for the trust. You need to go to the house, secure it. There are complexities with the trust that you will need to get up to speed on. Complexities? I asked. Arthur was worried about something. Mister, Cole said, he did not tell me everything, but he wanted you to have control. He trusted you. Haley, do not forget that. I left the office 20 minutes later, clutching the envelope to my chest. The rain had stopped, replaced by a biting wind coming off the Atlantic. As I walked toward my car, a man stepped out from the shelter of the building's awning. He wore a canvas work jacket and a cap pulled low. It took me a moment to recognize him. Jonah? I asked. Jonah Sutter looked up. He had been my father's business partner in the marina for as long as I could remember. His face was weathered like old driftwood, and his hands were rough and scarred from decades of working with boat engines. Hello? Haley? he said. His voice was rough. I am sorry. About everything. Thank you. Jonah, it's been hard. He glanced toward the parking lot exit where Miranda's sleek black Mercedes had disappeared. She is not happy. Is she? He asked. No. I said, she is not. Jonah stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen to me. Your dad. He was fixing something. In those last few months, he was moving money around, digging up old files. He told me to keep my head down. He said, Jonah, don't you talk to anyone about the books until the papers are safe. What papers? I asked, my grip tightening on the envelope. I don't know. He wouldn't say, but he was scared. Haley, Arthur didn't get scared of anything, but he was looking over his shoulder. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. Miranda said he was confused. Jonah shook his head. He wasn't confused. He was cornered. You be careful. This isn't just about who gets the house. Before I could ask him what he meant, a silver sedan pulled up sharply behind my car, blocking me in. The driver's side door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was dressed in a sharp gray suit, holding a leather portfolio. I recognized the logo on the car door. Vickers Legal Group, Sloan Vickers, the most aggressive probate litigator in the county. Haley Morris? She asked. Her voice was professional, devoid of warmth. Yes? She thrust a thick stack of stapled documents toward me. You are being served. This is a petition alleging undue influence and a request for an emergency injunction to freeze all estate distributions pending a competency hearing. I stared at the papers. I couldn't move my hands to take them. Take them, she said, or I will drop them at your feet. It counts the same. I took the stack. It was heavy. You cannot do this, I whispered. We just read the will 10 minutes ago, Ms. Vickers gave me a tight, pitying smile. We filed the motion this morning. Miranda knew what the document would say. She knows her father. Do not try to access the trust accounts. Ms. Morris, do not try to sell any assets. Everything is frozen as of this moment. Have a nice day. She got back in her car and reversed with precision, leaving me standing in the damp wind. I looked down at the paperwork. The words swam before my eyes. Plaintiff. Miranda Morris. Defendant. Haley Morris. She had sued me. My own sister had sued me before my father's grave had even settled. I got into my car, my legs feeling like jelly. I needed to go home. I needed to be in my father's house. The drive to 44 Briar Lane was a blur. The house sat on a rise overlooking the bay. A sprawling Victorian with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch. It looked lonely. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like my father. It didn't smell like pipe tobacco and sawdust and old books. It smelled of lemon pledge and bleach. I walked into the living room. It was tidy. Too tidy. The stack of magazines that always sat on the coffee table was gone. The throw pillows were arranged in perfect diamonds. My father was a messy man. Organized chaos was his style. He never straightened a pillow in his life. Someone had been here. I ran to the study. The filing cabinet drawers were closed. But when I opened the top one, the hanging folders were loose. There were gaps. Big gaps where years of tax returns and property deeds should have been. Panic rose in my throat. Sour and hot. Miranda. She must have come here right after he died. Maybe even before the funeral. She had a key. She had cleaned the place out. I backed out of the study, feeling violated. This wasn't just a legal fight. She was erasing him. She was curating the evidence. I needed to think. Where would he put something he didn't want her to find? Jonah said he was fixing something. Jonah said he was scared. My father spent half his life in the basement workshop. He tinkered with clocks, fixed toasters, built birdhouses. It was his sanctuary. I opened the basement door and descended the wooden stairs. The air down here was cooler, smelling of damp earth and oil. This room hadn't been touched by the cleaning frenzy. There was sawdust on the floor. A half-disassembled clock sat on the workbench. I walked over to the workbench. I remembered being a little girl, sitting on a stool while he worked. He used to hide candy for me. Look behind the sorrow, he would say. A weird little joke he made because he kept his spare change in a sorrowful-looking ceramic clown on the shelf. But he also had real hiding spots. I ran my hand under the heavy wooden lip of the workbench. My fingers brushed against something cold and metallic, a false bottom. I grabbed a screwdriver from the pegboard and wedged it into the seam I knew was there. It popped open with a groan. Inside was a gray metal cash box. I pulled it out, my heart pounding in my ears. It was locked. I fumbled for the keychain Mr. Cole had given me. I tried the house key, the shed key, the small silver key that looked like it belonged to a diary. None of them fit. I wanted to scream. I rattled the box. Hearing paper shifting inside, I reached back into the hollow space under the bench to see if the key was there. My fingers touched a piece of folded notebook paper taped to the wood. I pulled it loose. It was my father's handwriting. Spiky. Rushed. Not the shaky scrawl of a man losing his mind. The firm hand of a man in a hurry. Haley, it read, if this goes to court, tell the truth even when it hurts. Don't let them bury the history. I stared at the note until the words blurred. Tell the truth even when it hurts. He knew. He knew Miranda would come for me. He knew it would end up in a courtroom. I put the cash box in my tote bag. I didn't know what was in it, and I didn't have the key. But I knew one thing for sure. Miranda didn't have it. I needed a lawyer, not Mr. Cole. He was the estate attorney. He had to remain neutral. I needed someone who wasn't afraid of Sloane Vickers. I drove into town, bypassing the fancy firms near the courthouse. I pulled up to a small office above a bakery. Elena Park, attorney at law. I had gone to high school with Elena. She was quiet, scholarship smart, and tough as nails. She didn't come from money, which in Briar Glen meant she had to work twice as hard to get half as far. I walked up the stairs and found her sitting behind a desk buried in files. She looked up, pushing her glasses up her nose. Haley, she asked, I heard about your dad. I am so sorry. I didn't have time for pleasantries. I dropped the stack of papers Sloane Vickers had given me onto her desk. Miranda is suing me, I said. She wants everything. Elena didn't look surprised. She pulled the stack toward her and started reading. Her eyes scanned the pages rapidly. Undue influence, she muttered. Standard play. Emergency injunction. Also standard. She looked up at me. This is the scorched earth strategy. Haley, it is called freeze and starve. They lock up the assets so you cannot access a dime of the inheritance. They drag out the discovery process for months, maybe years. They bleed you dry on legal fees until you are so broke and exhausted you agree to settle for a fraction of what you were left. I sat down heavily in the client chair. I don't have money for a long fight. Elena, I have my savings, but that won't last forever. Elena nodded. Miranda knows that. That is the leverage. Sloane Vickers charges $600 an hour. She will bury us in paperwork just to see if you blink. She leaned forward. But here's the thing about bullies. Haley. They usually rush because they are hiding something. If Miranda was sure the will was invalid, she would let the process play out. Filing an emergency injunction the day of the reading? That is panic. Panic? I asked. Miranda doesn't panic. Everyone panics when they lose control. Elena said. She opened a fresh notepad. Here are the rules. Number 1. Document everything. Every text, every email, every voicemail. Number 2. Do not speak to Miranda without me present. Not even if she shows up at your door crying. Not even if she talks about Mom. She is not your sister right now. She is the plaintiff. And number 3. We need to find out why she wants the trust so badly. Is it just greed? Or is there something in those land holdings she needs to control? I thought about the cash box in my bag. I thought about the files missing from the study. I think there is something. I said, my dad left me a note. He said to tell the truth. Elena's eyes narrowed. Then we find the truth, she said. But we have to be smart. If you act rashly, they will paint you as unstable. That is their narrative. You are the emotional, flighty younger sister. We have to be boring. We have to be precise. I hired her on the spot. I wrote her a check for a retainer that took a chunk out of my savings. and I walked out feeling a little less like a victim and a little more like a combatant. I spent the evening at the house. I didn't turn on the main lights. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, checking locks. I felt exposed. The house, which had always been my fortress, now felt like a glass box. I sat on the kitchen floor with a glass of wine, staring at the locked cash box. I shook it again. What was in there? A ledger? A confession? My phone buzzed on the counter. It was a block number. I hesitated, then picked it up. Hello? There was a pause. I could hear breathing on the other end. Walk away, a voice said. It was distorted, digital, or maybe just muffled by a cloth. Who is this? I demanded. You don't know what you're holding, the voice said. The line went dead. I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, listening to the silence. Fear, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. This wasn't just Miranda being mean. Miranda wouldn't use a voice changer. Miranda would just insult me to my face. This was something else. I looked at the cash box. You don't know what you're holding. They were right. I didn't know, but my father did. I stood up and walked to the sink, pouring the rest of the wine down the drain. My hands were steady now. The grief was still there, a massive, dark ocean inside me. But something else was rising above the waterline. Anger. They thought they could scare me. They thought they could starve me out, lock me out of my own home, and erase my father's wishes. They thought I was the weak sister, the one who ran away to Chicago because she couldn't handle the pressure. I walked to the back door and locked the deadbolt. I checked the windows. I took the cash box and carried it upstairs to my bedroom. Sliding it under the bed, I lay down in the dark, staring at the ceiling where the shadows of the oak branches danced in the moonlight. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't walking away. My father had left me this fight. He had left it to me because he knew Miranda would bury the truth for a profit. He chose me, not because I was the favorite, but because I was the only one who wouldn't sell him out. I closed my eyes. Okay, Dad. I whispered into the dark. I'm listening. Tomorrow, I would start digging, and I wouldn't stop until I found the key. Small towns have a way of suffocating you with politeness while they tighten the noose. In Chicago, if someone hated you, they ignored you or screamed at you on the L train. In Briar Glen, they brought you a casserole and asked about your flight back while their eyes scanned your face for the cracks they had heard about. By Tuesday, the narrative had set like concrete. I was no longer Arthur Morris's grieving daughter. I was the prodigal disaster. I was the one who had failed in the big city and come crawling back to cash in the chips. I felt it in the checkout line at Miller's Grocery, the cashier. A woman named Patty, who had taught me Sunday school, didn't ask how I was holding up. She scanned my milk and eggs with a tight, deliberate efficiency. I heard you are staying at the house, Patty said, not looking me in the eye. Yes, I said, just until things are settled. Patty hummed, a sound that vibrated with judgment. Miranda was in here yesterday. She looked exhausted. Poor thing has been carrying so much weight this past year. It is a blessing she has such a good head on her shoulders. The implication hung there, heavy as the humid air in the produce section. Unlike you, I walked out to the parking lot, my cheeks burning. Miranda was winning the war before I had even put on my boots. She had the town's sympathy because she had been here. She had been the one visible at the Rotary Club dinners and the hospital fundraisers. Presence was currency, and I was bankrupt. I drove straight to Elena Park's office. I needed reality, not rumors. Elena was buried behind a wall of accordion folders. She looked tired, but her eyes were bright with that sharp, hunting intelligence I was coming to rely on. Close the door, she said. I sat down. What is it? Elena slid a document across the desk. It was a photocopy of a caregiving contract, dated 8 months ago. It outlined a monthly stipend paid from my father's accounts to a private nursing service, signed by Arthur Morris. Miranda included this in her initial disclosures. Elena said, "She is trying to show that Arthur required professional help long before he died, establishing a pattern of decline. If he was declining, his capacity to change his will in August becomes questionable." I looked at the signature. It was shaky. The A trailed off into a jagged line. He had a tremor, I said, defending him even now. His hands shook when he was tired. Look closer, Elena said. I squinted. The ink pressure was heavy at the start of the signature and light at the end. Now look at this, Elena said, sliding a check across the desk. This is a check he wrote to the electric company the same week. The signature on the check was shaky. Yes, but the slant was different. My father's M always looped high. The M on the contract was flat, compressed. It is not him, I whispered. It is a simulation, Elena said, or a tracing. It is close enough to pass a bank teller's glance, but not a forensic analysis. I want to hire a handwriting expert, Haley, but we need the originals. Miranda's lawyers are sending copies. They claim the originals are safely stored for probate. She leaned back. Why forge a caregiving contract? I asked. It's just a few $1,000s, because it establishes a narrative, Elena said. It proves he was weak, and if he was weak, he could be manipulated. Miranda is building a castle out of these little bricks. We have to knock them down one by one. I left her office feeling a strange mix of validation and nausea. My sister wasn't just fighting me. She was manufacturing a version of our father that didn't exist. She was turning a proud, capable man into an invalid to suit her ledger. I needed to clear my head. I drove down to the harbor, the smell of low tide, salt, rotting kelp, and diesel fuel filled the car. I parked in front of Sutter Marine Supply. Jonah was behind the counter, counting brass fittings into a bin. He looked up when the bell chimed, and his face softened. Haley, he said, I need to ask you something. Jonah, and I need you to not protect me. He put down the fittings. He wiped his hands on a rag, taking his time. Your dad was a stubborn mule. He said, he was. I agreed, but he wasn't a liar. Jonah sighed. He walked around the counter and flipped the sign on the door to closed. He gestured for me to follow him into the back office. It was a cramped room that smelled of stale coffee and old paper. He sat on a folding chair and pointed to a stack of ledgers on the shelf. We ran this place together for 30 years, Jonah said. Arthur handled the big picture, the land, the contracts. I handled the boats. About 5 years ago, we had a partnership on a development deal. Some condos up on the ridge. We brought in some outside money because the upfront costs were too high. Outside money? I asked. Investors. A group from Boston. Silent partners. Or that is what they said. Jonah rubbed his face. It went south. The permits got held up. The money disappeared. We took a loss. A big one. But Arthur, he couldn't let it go. He kept saying the numbers didn't add up. He said the loss was too clean. Too clean? Usually. When you lose money on a build, it is a mess, Jonah explained. You owe contractors. You owe the lumber yard. This? It was just gone. The books balanced perfectly to zero. Arthur thought someone siphoned the funds and cooked the ledger to make it look like bad luck instead of theft. I leaned forward. Did he find out who? Jonah shook his head. He stopped talking about it, but last year, when he started getting sick, or when Miranda said he was getting sick, he started digging again. He told me he was afraid the estate audit would trigger a review of that old partnership. He said, Jonah, if they look too close at the old deal, they are going to find the rot. Who is they? I don't know. The IRS? The investors? Jonah looked me in the eye. He believed someone left those books clean for a reason. And he believed that if he made noise, they would come for the rest of his land. The chill in the room had nothing to do with the drafty window. Jonah, I said, did he keep any records? He kept everything. Jonah said, you know him. I went back to the house with a new purpose. If Arthur was investigating a financial crime, he wouldn't have left the evidence on the dining room table. I went to the study. I had noticed the missing files before, but now I looked for the hardware. His laptop, a clunky Dell he used for email and solitaire, was gone. The charger was still plugged into the wall strip, the cord snaking across the desk like a dead vine, but the machine was vanished. Miranda, she must have taken it. I started pulling out drawers, pens, paper clips, old birthday cards. I pulled the bottom drawer all the way out, dumping the contents on the floor. Under the lining paper of the drawer, I found a single sheet of paper. It was a page torn from a wall calendar. October. 3 months ago, the days were filled with his chicken scratch notes. Dentist, oil change, call Haley, but on the third Tuesday of the month. He had circled the date in thick red marker. Inside the circle, he had written 3 words: gray suit, Tuesday, and below that, in smaller print, Northgate, Unit 404, Northgate Secure Storage. It was a facility out on the highway, a place where people stored their boats for the winter or their furniture after a divorce. I grabbed my keys. The drive to Northgate took 20 minutes. The facility was a sprawling grid of orange metal doors surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. It looked less like storage and more like a minimum security prison. I walked into the front office. A young man with a wispy mustache and a nervous tick in his eye was sitting behind the plexiglass. He was watching a video on his phone, the sound tinny and loud. "Can I help you?" he asked, pausing the video. "I hope so," I said. "My father, Arthur Morris, rented a unit here, Unit 404. He passed away recently, and I need to access it." The clerk's face went blank. He typed something into his computer. "Morris," he muttered. "Arthur." He stopped typing. He looked at the screen, then at me. "That unit is closed." He said, "Closed?" I asked. "When?" "The system says it was vacated and the contract terminated. Last week." "Last week?" "That was the week of the funeral." "Who closed it?" "Authorized party," he recited. "I am the executor of the estate." I said, channeling my best Elena Park impression. "I need to know who the authorized party was. Was it Miranda Morris?" "I can't give out that information." He said, "Privacy policy." I looked around the small office. There was a security monitor on the wall showing 4 camera feeds. One of the feeds, labeled Main Gate, was pointed at a sharp angle toward the sky, capturing nothing but gray clouds. "You have cameras." I said, "You have footage of who cleaned out the unit." "We overwrite every 48 hours, he said quickly. Too quickly. I looked at him. Sweat was beading on his upper lip. He wasn't just unhelpful. He was scared. "Who was here?" I asked, leaning closer to the glass. "Did a woman come? Blonde? Expensive clothes?" The clerk stood up. "Ma'am, you need to leave. The unit is empty. There is nothing to see." I stared at him for a long moment. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He kept glancing at the phone on his desk, as if waiting for it to ring. "Fine," I said. I walked out. As I got into my car, I saw him pick up the landline receiver immediately. He wasn't calling a customer. He was reporting in. I sat in the car, my heart hammering. Someone had gotten there first. Gray suit. Was that a description or a name? My phone buzzed. A notification from my email. New motion filed. Estate of Arthur Morris. I opened it. It was from Sloan Vickers. Supplemental motion for discovery and request for court-ordered inventory. The text was aggressive. Miranda was alleging that I was dissipating assets and hiding valuables from the estate. She was requesting a formal inventory of the home, to be conducted by a court-appointed appraiser, with both parties present. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. She was accusing me of stealing? I was the one finding empty drawers and missing laptops. But I knew I couldn't refuse. If I said no, I looked like I was hiding something. Refusal was an admission of guilt in the court of public opinion. I called Elena. "Let them come," Elena said. "We have nothing to hide, but we watch them like hawks." The inventory was scheduled for Thursday morning. Thursday dawned with a sky the color of a bruise. I was up at 6, drinking coffee that tasted like acid. At 9 o'clock, a van pulled up. Miranda arrived in her Mercedes. Sloan Vickers was with her, looking like a shark in a pinstripe suit. The appraiser was a small, fussy man named Mr. Henderson, who carried a clipboard and a digital voice recorder. Miranda didn't say hello. She walked past me into the foyer, peeling off her leather gloves. "This shouldn't take long," she said to the air. Unless there are surprises. Mister, Henderson began in the living room. One antique mahogany sideboard. Approximate value, $800. One oil painting. Seascape. Artist unknown. It was excruciating. They moved through the house, touching everything. My father's pipe stand, his favorite armchair. They were reducing his life to a spreadsheet. Miranda watched with a detached, critical eye, occasionally pointing out items she claimed were missing, forcing me to explain that the silver tea set had been sold 10 years ago to pay for a new roof. We moved to the study. Mr. Henderson picked up a framed photograph from the bookshelf. It was a picture of my parents on their honeymoon, young and windblown on a ferry. He turned it over to check the backing. "Hello?" he said. "What is this?" The backing of the frame was torn. Tucked between the cardboard and the velvet stand was a white envelope. I hadn't seen it. I had dusted that shelf, but I hadn't moved the picture. "Mister?" Henderson pulled the envelope out. It wasn't sealed. He opened it. "It's empty," he said. Miranda stepped forward. "Let me see." She snatched the envelope from him before I could object. She peered inside. "Just trash," she said, crumpling it slightly. "Wait," I said. I reached out and took it from her hand. Her grip was tight, resisting for a split second before letting go. I smoothed it out. It was empty. But something was stuck in the bottom corner, a torn scrap of paper, maybe the corner of a letter that had been ripped out in haste. On the scrap was a partial logo, a stylized blue tree with 3 roots, and the letters CALD, CIV, FOU. I looked at Miranda. For a microsecond, her mask slipped. Her eyes widened, and her lips parted in a sharp intake of breath. It was recognition, immediate, visceral recognition. Then the mask slammed back down. "Garbage," she said, her voice flat. "Arthur probably used it as a bookmark." I looked at the logo again. Caldwell Civic Foundation. I had never heard of it, but Miranda had. "Can we move on?" Sloane Vickers said, checking her watch. "We are billing by the hour." The rest of the inventory passed in a blur. I was on autopilot, my mind racing. When they finally left, I didn't wait to lock the door. I ran to the computer, my own laptop, and typed in the words, "Caldwell Civic Foundation." The search results populated. It was a charitable organization based in Boston, focused on urban renewal and community development. The board of directors read like a who's who of Massachusetts old money. I dug deeper. I looked at their recent filings. The foundation had been active in Briar Glen, very active, over the last 2 years. They had purchased 4 parcels of land. I pulled up the county tax map. My heart stopped. The parcels they bought weren't random. One was the old cannery. One was the abandoned gas station on Route 1. One was a wooded lot off the highway. They formed a semicircle, and right in the center of that semicircle, like the hole in a donut, was the Morris Coastal Trust land. They were surrounding us. I picked up the phone and called Elena. "I found something." I said, "It's not just a family fight, Elena. It's a land grab." I explained the map. I explained the logo. Elena was silent for a moment. "This explains the pressure," she said. "If Miranda controls the estate, she controls the land. If she sells to them, she makes a fortune." I finished, and they get the last piece of the puzzle. "We need the money trail," Elena said. "I am going to subpoena the bank records again. I don't care what objections they file. We need to know if anyone from Caldwell has been paying Arthur or Miranda." But the money trail was slow. Miranda's team filed an objection the next day, citing privacy concerns and irrelevance. They were stalling. They knew that every day the assets were frozen was a day I was bleeding cash. I understood then what Elena meant by freeze and starve. They didn't need to win on the facts. They just needed to wait until I couldn't afford to pay my electric bill. Money could buy time, and time was a weapon. That Sunday, I was sweeping the porch when a beat-up station wagon pulled into the driveway. It was Aunt Lorna, my mother's sister. We hadn't seen much of Lorna since Mom died. She was the black sheep of her side of the family. A woman who read tarot cards and smoked menthols and had never married. She climbed out of the car, clutching her purse. "Haley," she said, "you look like hell." Hello, Lorna. She walked up the steps and sat on the swing. She didn't want to come inside. I heard about the court. She said, "The whole town is talking. They say you are dragging Miranda through the mud. They say a lot of things." Lorna lit a cigarette, her hands trembling slightly. "You need to know something," she said, "about your father and Miranda." I sat on the railing. "What about them?" "They weren't speaking." Lorna said, "For 6 months last year. Not a word. Arthur banned her from the house." "Banned her? Why?" Lorna blew smoke into the cold air. "He had a meeting with some men from the city. Suits. They came here, to the house. Miranda was with them. I was dropping off a casserole. And I heard shouting. Arthur was yelling that he wouldn't sell his soul. He told Miranda to get them off his property. I stared at her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because 2 weeks later—" "They were fine," Lorna said. "Just like that. Miranda came over for Sunday dinner. Arthur was quiet, but he was polite. I thought they worked it out. I thought he forgave her." She looked at me, her eyes watery. But now, looking at how fast she moved on this will, I don't think he forgave her. Haley, I think they made a deal. I think she promised him something to get back in the house, or threatened him. I thought— Lorna stood up and crushed the cigarette under her heel. "Be careful. Haley, Arthur was a tough man, and they broke him. You are just a girl with a graphic design degree. They will eat you alive." She got in her car and drove away, leaving me alone with the wind. I stood on the porch, looking out at the bay. The gray water churned, whitecaps breaking against the rocks. I felt a cold knot of dread in my stomach. This wasn't a sibling rivalry. Miranda was just the face of it. Behind her were the men in suits. Behind her was the Caldwell Civic Foundation. Behind her was a machine that chewed up small towns and spit out condos. I went inside and locked the door. I checked the windows. I felt hunted. I thought about the calendar, gray suit. I thought about the voicemail. Walk away. I went upstairs and pulled the cash box out from under the bed. I still didn't have the key. I traced the cold metal with my finger. I wasn't just fighting for an inheritance anymore. I was fighting a ghost story that was becoming terrifyingly real. My father had stumbled onto a truth that was dangerous enough to make him hide evidence in a fake wall. And now, I was standing in his footprints. I wasn't safe here, but I couldn't leave. If I left, they won. I sat on the floor, the shadows lengthening across the room. I missed my dad. I missed the simplicity of grief. Now, I couldn't even mourn him properly because every memory was tainted with suspicion. Was he afraid when he died? Was he alone? I realized then that I was crying, not the soft weeping of loss, but the hot, angry tears of the cornered. Let them come, I thought, wiping my face. Let them try. But deep down, in the place where my courage was supposed to be, there was only a growing, gnawing silence. And the certainty that the man in the black suit, whoever he was, wasn't done with us yet. The Bryan County Probate Court was a place where family histories were stripped naked and judged by strangers. The air inside courtroom B smelled of floor wax, damp wool, and the sour perspiration of people realizing they were losing money. I sat at the defendant's table next to Elena. My hands were folded in my lap, knuckles white, across the aisle, at the plaintiff's table. Miranda sat like a queen in exile. She wore a navy-sheath dress and pearls. Her posture impeccable, her face a mask of sorrowful duty. She didn't look at me. She looked at the judge, the Honorable Raymond Klein, as if he were the only other reasonable person in the room. Judge Klein was a heavy man with a face like a bulldog, jowls resting over his collar. He shuffled the papers in front of him with a slow, deliberate rhythm. "Ms. Vickers," the judge rumbled, "you may proceed with your opening regarding the motion for the emergency injunction." Sloane Vickers stood up. She didn't need notes. She walked toward the bench, her heels clicking a sharp staccato on the parquet floor. "Your Honor," she began, her voice smooth and caring to the back of the room, "we are here because Arthur Morris was a man in decline. For the last 18 months of his life, his physical and mental faculties were eroding. During this difficult time, it was my client, Miranda Morris, who managed his health care. It was Miranda Morris who paid the bills. It was Miranda Morris who ensured he was fed and safe. She paused, turning slightly to gesture toward me, a gesture that felt like an accusation. And where was the defendant? Haley Morris? She was in Chicago. She was absent. She was pursuing her own life, over 800 miles away. She visited twice in 2 years. Yet, we are asked to believe that in August, during a period of documented confusion, Mr. Morris suddenly decided to disinherit the daughter who cared for him in favor of the daughter who abandoned him? The word abandoned hung in the air. I felt a flush of heat crawl up my neck. I wanted to stand up and scream that I called him every Sunday, that he told me not to come because he didn't want me to see him getting old. But I couldn't. I had to sit there and let her rewrite my life. Vickers continued, "We believe the changes to the will were the result of undue influence, likely exerted during phone calls where the defendant manipulated a lonely, confused old man. We are asking the court to maintain the freeze on all assets until a full competency hearing can be conducted." Judge Klein looked at Elena. "Ms. Park?" Elena stood up. She was half Sloane Vickers's height, but she possessed a quiet gravity that filled the space. "Your Honor, the plaintiff paints a picture of a man in cognitive decline, but the evidence tells a different story. I have here sworn affidavits from 3 of Arthur Morris's closest friends, Mr. Jonah Sutter, his business partner of 30 years, Mrs. Higgins, the town librarian, and Reverend Miller. All 3 state that Arthur was sharp, engaged, and fully entirely of his faculties up until the day he died." Elena placed the affidavits on the bench. Arthur Morris did not change his will out of confusion. "Your Honor, he changed it out of clarity. He knew his daughters. He knew Miranda Morris was financially secure. He knew Haley Morris loved the land. This is not a case of undue influence. It is a case of a disappointed heir trying to use this court to correct a decision she simply does not like." Judge Klein read the papers, his expression unreadable. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "I am ordering limited discovery," he said, his voice flat. "I want the medical records from the last 2 years. I want the financial records. But I will warn you both right now. I have sat on this bench for 20 years. I have seen families tear each other apart over china sets and ride-on mowers. I will not have this court turned into a trial by rumor. If you have evidence of fraud, bring it. If you have evidence of coercion, bring it. But do not waste my time with character assassination." He banged the gavel. Hearing adjourned, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for an hour. Elena packed her briefcase. "We did okay," she whispered. "Limited discovery is good. It gives us a chance to get the bank records." We walked out of the courtroom and into the hallway. Miranda was there, whispering urgently to Sloane Vickers. As we passed, Miranda looked up, her eyes met mine, and for a second, the sorrowful mask vanished. "You are going to lose, Haley," she said softly. "You have no idea what you are fighting." I stopped. "I am fighting for what Dad wanted." I said. Miranda gave a small, chilling smile. "Dad didn't know what he wanted. He was scared. And now you should be, too." Elena pulled me away before I could respond. "Don't engage," she muttered. "That is what she wants. She wants you to scream at her in the hallway so she can tell the judge you are unhinged." We walked out into the biting cold of the parking lot. The sky was a flat, oppressive gray. I fumbled for my car keys, my hands shaking from the adrenaline dump. I noticed a man standing near the entrance to the lot. He was leaning against a dark sedan, smoking a cigarette. He wore a heavy black pea coat and sunglasses. Despite the lack of sun, he wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking at me. It wasn't a casual glance. It was a fixed, professional stare. He looked like private security. Broad shoulders, military haircut, stillness that came from training. I froze. Elena was already at her car. 2 rows over. "Can I help you?" I called out to him. The man didn't flinch. He took a long drag of his cigarette, dropped it on the pavement, and crushed it with the toe of his boot. "Wrong person," he said. His voice was calm, baritone, and completely devoid of surprise. He turned, opened the door of the sedan, and got in. The car started with a low hum, and he drove away slowly, never looking back. I stood there, rattled. Wrong person. He had been staring right at my face. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. "I see you." I drove home with my eyes constantly checking the rearview mirror. Every car behind me looked suspicious. Every shadow looked like a threat. When I got to the house, I locked the door and leaned against it, breathing hard. Miranda's words echoed in my head. He was scared. Jonah's words. He was looking over his shoulder. I couldn't just sit here. I couldn't wait for Elena to file motions while these people, whoever they were, circled closer. I needed to find what he was hiding. I went to the garage. It was a detached structure, cluttered with 40 years of accumulated life. Old bicycles, stacks of National Geographic, jars of nails sorted by size. I had searched the house, but I hadn't really searched the garage. It was freezing inside. I pulled my coat tighter. I stood in the center of the concrete floor and tried to think like Arthur Morris. If I were hiding paperwork, where would I put it? Not in a file cabinet. That was too obvious. Not in a safe. Safes were the first place people looked. I looked at the shelves along the back wall. They were lined with paint cans, dozens of them, house paint, primer, varnish, some of them rusted shut, dating back to the 90s. My father was a creature of habit. He organized everything, but something about the shelf caught my eye. The cans on the middle shelf were spaced perfectly, but the dust around them was disturbed, just slightly, like they had been moved and put back recently. I walked over and started pulling the cans down. Antique white, colonial blue, deck gray, behind the row of cans. The wood of the shelf backing looked different. There was a seam. I used my fingernails to pry at the edge of the plywood panel. It gave way. It wasn't nailed down. It was held in place by magnetic strips. I pulled the panel off. Behind it was a narrow cavity, insulated with pink fiberglass, and wedged into the insulation was a manila folder. My heart hammered against my ribs. I pulled the folder out. It wasn't the cash box key. It was a stack of papers, thin, onion skin paper, carbon copies. I flipped through them. They were letters. Letters my father had typed on his old typewriter. He never trusted computers for the important stuff. They were addressed to the regional manager of Briar Glen Tax and Ledger, to whom it may concern. The first one read, dated 6 months ago. I am writing to formally request a forensic audit of the Morris-Sutter Partnership accounts for the fiscal years 2019 and 2020. I have reason to believe that authorization signatures on the disbursement forms were falsified. I turned the page. Another letter. This one to a compliance officer at a bank in Boston. I am requesting the retrieval of archived transaction logs regarding the wire transfers to Holt Consulting Group. I did not authorize these transfers, and the signature on file does not match my records. I sat down on a bucket, my hands trembling. He wasn't just paranoid. He was investigating. He was building a case, and he was keeping carbon copies because he knew the originals might disappear. I grabbed the folder and ran to my car. I drove straight to the marina. Jonah was on the dock, tarping a boat for the winter. He saw my face and dropped the ropes. "Come inside," he said. We went into his office. I slammed the folder down on his desk. He knew. Jonah, he knew about the forgery. Jonah opened the folder. He put on his reading glasses, his rough fingers tracing the typed lines. He read in silence for a long time. When he looked up, his face was pale. "Holt Consulting." He whispered, "Who is Holt?" I asked. "Who is Darius Holt?" Jonah sighed. A sound like a deflating tire. Darius Holt was the project manager on that development deal I told you about. The one that went bust. He was the one who brought in the investors. Smooth talker. Wore suits that cost more than my house. He tapped the paper. Arthur always suspected Holt was skimming, but we couldn't prove it. The books were too clean. But if Arthur found proof that Holt forged his signature, that is a felony. That is prison time. And Holt is connected to the Caldwell Civic Foundation? I asked. Jonah nodded slowly. I did some asking around after you left the other day. Darius Holt is listed as a strategic advisor for Caldwell. He is on their payroll. The pieces clicked together like a bear trap snapping shut. Holt skimmed money from the partnership years ago. Arthur started digging. Holt, and the people behind him at Caldwell, got scared. They needed Arthur quiet, or they needed his land to cover their tracks. And Miranda? I asked. Where does she fit in? Jonah looked away. Out the window at the gray harbor, Miranda was always ambitious. Haley, she wanted to be a player. Maybe she thought she was making a smart business deal. Maybe she didn't know how deep the rot went. Or maybe she didn't care. I finished. I left Jonah and drove to Elena's office. When I showed her the carbon copies, she didn't celebrate. She looked terrified. This is good evidence, she said, but it is also dangerous. These letters prove Arthur was accusing them of fraud. That gives them a motive for everything. The will contest, the harassment, the rush to seize the estate. She paced the small office. I am filing for a temporary restraining order, she said, to prevent Miranda from selling or encumbering any assets of the trust. If she tries to sell the land to Caldwell while this is in probate, we need to block it. Do it, I said. The next 3 days were a blur of legal paperwork. Elena filed the motion. Miranda's team retaliated instantly. They filed a counter-motion seeking a court-appointed administrator to take over the estate entirely. Their argument was brutal. They claimed I was too emotional to manage the assets. They cited my paranoia, likely referencing my run-ins with the security guard, which Miranda somehow knew about, as proof that I was mentally unfit. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Thursday morning via certified mail. I signed for it, tearing open the thick envelope in the kitchen. It was on Vickers Legal Group letterhead. Confidential settlement offer. I read the terms. My breath caught in my throat. Ms. Miranda Morris offers to withdraw her contest of the will and grant Ms. Haley Morris full and clear title to the residential property at 44 Briar Lane, along with a cash settlement of $50,000 in exchange. Ms. Haley Morris agrees to immediately transfer all controlling shares of the Morris Coastal Trust to Miss Miranda Morris and waive all future claims regarding the estate. This offer expires in 48 hours. I called Elena. They are offering me the house. I said, I know. Elena said, I got a copy. It is a trap. Haley, how is it a trap? I get the house. Elena's voice was sharp. Look at the deadline, 48 hours. They are pressuring you. And look at what they want. The trust. They don't care about the house. They don't care about the furniture. They want the land, the waterfront, the acreage next to the Caldwell lots. If you sign that, Elena continued, you are giving them exactly what they want. And you are burying your father's investigation forever, because once you sign, you waive all claims. You can't sue them for fraud later. I looked at the paper. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. I could end the fighting. I could keep my home. I could go back to sleeping at night. But then I remembered the note. Tell the truth even when it hurts. I remembered the carbon copies in the garage. I can't sign it. I said, good, Elena said, but be prepared. When we refuse, they are going to take the gloves off. They offered you the carrot. Now comes the stick. I hung up. I felt like the walls were closing in. I needed to talk to someone who wasn't a lawyer or a witness. I called Marin. Marin and I had been best friends since kindergarten. She was a nurse at the county hospital, grounded and sane in a way I hadn't been for weeks. She came over with a bottle of wine and a pizza. We sat on the living room floor. You look like a ghost, she said, pouring me a glass. I feel like one, I said. I told her everything. The man in the parking lot, the carbon copies, the settlement offer. She listened, chewing a slice of pepperoni. Okay, she said. So you are in a John Grisham novel. That sucks. It's not funny. Marin, I know it's not. But you need to stop reacting. Haley, you are running around like a headless chicken. You are scared, and they know it. She pointed her wine glass at me. You need to get strategic. Stop waiting for them to hit you. Start building your defense. She got up and went to the kitchen drawer. Pulling out a roll of butcher paper and a marker, she taped the paper to the dining room wall. Timeline, she said. Write it down. Get it out of your head and onto the wall. We spent the next 2 hours mapping it out. Year 2020. Partnership with Holt fails. Money vanishes. Year 2024. Early. Arthur suspects fraud. Starts writing letters. August 2024. Arthur changes will. Meets with lawyer. October 2024. Arthur visits storage unit. Gray suit. January 2025. Arthur dies. February 2025. Miranda sues. Caldwell Foundation appears. Seeing it on the wall changed something in me. It wasn't just a mess of feelings anymore. It was a sequence, a cause and effect. Arthur got close to the truth. Arthur died. Miranda moved in to bury the truth. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. I wasn't just a victim, I was a detective. The next morning, I woke up with a strange clarity. I was thinking about the timeline. I was thinking about the gaps. I was thinking about the cash box. I still didn't have the key, and I still didn't know where the gray suit fit in. I wandered into the living room. My eyes fell on the bookshelf. My dad had hundreds of books, histories, manuals, thrillers. I remembered a summer night. Years ago, I was 25, home for a visit, going through a bad breakup. Dad had sat with me on the porch and read aloud to me. It sounds childish, but it wasn't. He read Robert Frost. The Death of the Hired Man. Home is the place where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in. I walked over to the poetry section. I pulled down the worn copy of The Poetry of Robert Frost. It fell open in my hands. It fell open because something was wedged in the binding. It wasn't a bookmark. It was a receipt. A thermal paper slip. Fading with age. I picked it up. Red Harbor Federal Bank. Safety deposit box rental. Box 312. Date. November 12th, 2024. November, 2 months before he died. He hadn't put the key in the cash box. He had put the location of the real secrets in a book he knew I would remember. I grabbed my purse. Red Harbor was 30 minutes north. I drove fast. The gray highway blurring past. Red Harbor Federal Bank was a small stone building on the main street. I walked in. Clutching the receipt and my letters of executorship, I approached the desk. A woman with silver hair and reading glasses looked up. "Can I help you?" "I am Haley Morris. I am the executor of Arthur Morris's estate. I found this receipt. I believe my father has a safety deposit box here." She took the receipt and my documents. "I will need to verify the paperwork," she said. "Please have a seat." I sat in the stiff leather chair, my leg bouncing nervously. This was it. Whatever was in that box. The ledger, the original letters, maybe the key to the cash box. It was the answer. 10 minutes later, the woman returned. She looked serious. "Ms. Morris, the paperwork appears to be in order. We do have a box registered to Arthur Morris. Box 312. I stood up. "I would like to access it. Please, I have the death certificate." She hesitated. She looked down at the file in her hand. "There is a complication." She said, "What complication?" The box was set up with a requirement for 2 authorized signers for access, or the presence of a specific co-signer upon the death of the primary holder. "Co-signer?" I asked. "Who is the co-signer?" She turned the card around so I could see it. The signature card had 2 lines. The first was Arthur Morris. The second was signed in a looping. Elegant script. M. Morris. My stomach dropped through the floor. "Miranda, Ms. Morris," the woman said gently, "the co-signer has access rights. And according to our logs," she paused, checking the screen. "Ms. Miranda Morris accessed the box 3 days ago." The room spun. 3 days ago, the day after the hearing. She had been here. She had the key. She had the authority. Is it empty?" I whispered. "I cannot say without opening it," the woman said. "But I can tell you that the visit duration was 15 minutes. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Miranda had beaten me. She knew about the bank. She knew about the box. I leaned against the counter, fighting the urge to vomit. She had been here. She had taken whatever my father was hiding. But then, a thought struck me, a sharp, desperate hope. My father was smart. He knew Miranda was involved with the people he was investigating. He knew she was the danger. Why would he make her the co-signer on the box that held the evidence against her? Unless M. Morris wasn't Miranda. I looked at the signature again. M. Morris. My mother's name was Mary, but she had been dead for 10 years. Who else was an M? I stared at the loop of the M. It was elegant, controlled. It looked exactly like Miranda's signature. The clerk was watching me with pity. I am sorry. Ms. Morris, would you still like to view the box? Yes, I said, my voice hollow. Open it. She led me into the vault. The heavy metal door swung open. She used her master key, and I used the key from the estate ring that Mr. Cole had given me. It fit. She slid the long metal box out and placed it on the table. I will give you some privacy. She left. I stood there, staring at the gray metal lid. If Miranda had been here, it would be empty. It would be cleaned out, just like the study. I lifted the lid. It wasn't empty, but it didn't contain papers. It didn't contain a ledger. It contained a single, heavy object wrapped in a velvet cloth. I unwrapped it. It was an old tarnished brass badge, a sheriff's deputy badge, and under it, a single index card with a handwritten note. If Judge Klein sees the badge, he will remember. I stared at the badge. I stared at the note. It wasn't financial records. It was leverage, and Miranda, or whoever M. Morris was, had left it here. Why? Because she didn't know what it meant? Or because she wanted me to find it? I picked up the badge. It was cold in my hand. The game had just changed. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about history. And Judge Klein was in the middle of it. The legal system is designed to move at the speed of a glacier, grinding down anyone foolish enough to get caught in its path. But in Briar Glen, the ice was melting fast, revealing things that had been buried for a very long time. We were back in front of Judge Klein 3 days after I found the badge in the safety deposit box. The badge was currently wrapped in a wool sock, taped inside the hollow leg of my bedside table. It felt radioactive, a heavy secret that I knew changed the geometry of the entire case, though I didn't yet know how. Elena stood before the bench, her posture rigid. Your Honor, she said, her voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room, we have evidence that the plaintiff, Miranda Morris, accessed the decedent's safety deposit box at Red Harbor Federal Bank on January 12th. This occurred after the death of Arthur Morris, but before the inventory of the estate was completed. We are petitioning the court to compel a full disclosure of the contents removed from that box. Sloane Vickers didn't even look up from her notes. She stood slowly, smoothing the front of her charcoal suit. Your Honor, this is another fishing expedition. My client did access the box. She removed personal family correspondence, letters from her mother, sentimental items that have no monetary value and are not subject to probate. We are under no obligation to disclose private family mementos to the defense simply to satisfy their paranoia. Elena shot back. The defense asserts that this box may have contained financial records relevant to the valuation of the estate. The timing of the access, days before the plaintiff filed her initial motion, is highly suspicious. Judge Klein looked tired. The pouches under his eyes seemed heavier than last week. He tapped his pen against the bench. Ms. Vickers, he rumbled. Did your client remove any assets? Bonds? Cash? Jewelry? No, Your Honor. Only documents. Then provide an inventory. Klein said. We cannot, Vickers replied smoothly. The items were personal. They were read and, in some cases, disposed of, as is the right of the next of kin regarding non-asset property. Disposed of? Elena's voice jumped an octave. You destroyed them? Vickers smiled, a thin, predatory expression. We tidied up. Ms. Park, privacy is not a crime. I sat there, Gripping the edge of the table, they had destroyed the evidence. Whatever papers my father had hidden in that box, the ledger, the proof of the fraud, Miranda had shredded them. But as I looked at Miranda, sitting perfectly still at the plaintiff's table, I felt a strange shift in my perspective. Arthur Morris was a man who played chess by mail. He planned 10 moves ahead. He knew Miranda, he knew her ambition, and he knew her ruthlessness. He had to have known she was a co-signer on that box. The signature card I saw at the bank was old. He never removed her. Why? Why leave the fox a key to the henhouse? Unless the henhouse was a trap. I realized then, with a jolt that nearly knocked the wind out of me, that the documents in the box might have been a decoy. He let her take them. He let her destroy them, because by destroying them, she proved she was hiding something. And he had left the one thing she wouldn't understand, the badge, for me. He was manufacturing a trail of tampering. He wasn't just hiding the truth. He was documenting the cover-up. Judge Klein rubbed his temples. "I am denying the motion to compel for now," he said. "Without proof that assets were taken, I cannot force the plaintiff to produce old letters, but I am noting the defense's objection for the record." "Move on." Elena sat down, fuming. "He is letting them get away with it," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "He isn't. Dad set this up. He wanted her to empty that box." Elena looked at me, confusion knitting her brow. But I didn't explain. Not here. Not with the man in the black suit possibly sitting in the gallery. We left the courthouse in silence. The winter sky was a relentless, flat white, threatening snow. "I need to see Jonah." I told Elena. "There is a clause." Dad mentioned a clause in one of those letters. I drove to the marina. The water was choppy, gray waves slapping angrily against the pilings. Jonah was in his office, surrounded by the smell of diesel and stale coffee. He looked older than he had a week ago. This fight was aging all of us. "I found it," Jonah said before I could even take off my coat. He pushed a thick yellow document across his desk. It was the original partnership agreement for the Morris Coastal Trust, dated 20 years ago. "Look at page 42, Jonah said, paragraph 7. I flipped to the page. The legal language was dense, but Jonah had highlighted a section in orange marker. "In the event of any modification, redaction, or alteration of financial records pertaining to the development assets, the managing partner must file a Form 10C notification with the State Office of Compliance and Ethics within 72 hours. Failure to file such notification shall constitute a breach of fiduciary duty and trigger an automatic external audit." I looked up. "What does this mean?" "It means," Jonah said, leaning back in his creaking chair, "that if they cooked the books on that bad deal 5 years ago, if they erased the losses to make it look clean, they had to file a notice, and if they didn't, then the entire partnership agreement is void," Jonah said, "and more importantly, it proves intent. You don't fail to file a mandatory notice by accident. You do it to hide the trail." "Did Dad know this?" "He wrote it," Jonah said. "He insisted on that clause. The investors hated it, but Arthur wouldn't sign without it. He called it his canary in the coal mine." I stared at the document. This was the tripwire. My father knew they would try to sanitize the records. He had built a mechanism that made the act of cleaning the crime a crime itself. "We need to see if that form was filed." I said, "It wasn't." Jonah said, "I checked with the state this morning. No filings for Morris Coastal Trust in 10 years. I felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the leverage. "I need a copy of this, Jonah, and I need to find out who drafted it." "The law firm was Harridan and Cole," Jonah said. "But the paralegal who actually typed it up? A woman named Sylvia Dane. She retired 3 years ago." Sylvia Dane. The name rang a bell. I had seen it in the visitation logs at the nursing home. Or maybe the hospital? No. I had seen C. Dane in the logs. A relative? "Where does she live?" I asked. Jonah scribbled an address on a scrap of paper. "Out on the point. She keeps to herself, but she was loyal to Arthur." I drove out to the point, the road winding through scrub pine and dunes. Sylvia Dane's house was a small, weather-beaten cottage with a porch full of wind chimes that sang a chaotic song in the gale. She opened the door before I knocked. She was a tiny woman with sharp eyes and hair dyed a defiant shade of red. "You look like him," she said. "Ms. Dane? I am Haley Morris. I know who you are. Come in. The wind is biting." Her living room was cluttered with books and ceramic cats. She made tea, her movements precise and quick. "Jonah called me," she said, setting a cup in front of me. "He said you found the claws." "Yes, Arthur was proud of that claws." She said, "He knew he was getting into bed with sharks. He wanted to make sure he had a harpoon." "Ms. Dane," I said, "I think Miranda is working with the people who defrauded him. I think they are trying to seize the land to cover it up." Sylvia took a sip of tea. She didn't look surprised. "Your sister was always malleable." Sylvia said, "She likes nice things. She likes the idea of power, but she doesn't understand the cost. Arthur tried to protect her from it, but you can't protect someone who wants to be used." She set the cup down. "There is something else you should know. Haley, Arthur came to see me last year, about 2 months before he died. He brought me a packet." "A packet?" "A sealed memorandum," she said. "He asked me to keep it," he said. "Sylvia, keep this off the books. Don't put it in the firm's vault. Put it somewhere safe." "Where is it?" I asked, leaning forward. "I don't have it," she said. My heart sank. "He told me to give it to a third party for safekeeping," she continued. "Someone completely outside the loop. Someone the law firm would never subpoena." "Who?" She smiled. A cryptic, tight little smile. "He didn't tell me the name. He just drove me to the location, had me drop it in a drop box, and drove me home. But he said something strange. He said, 'If the family gets ugly, this is the silver bullet.'" "Where was the drop box?" "It was a P.O. box in the strip mall near the highway." She said, "But the box wasn't rented in his name. It was rented in the name of a shell company. Blue Heron Logistics." I wrote it down. "Blue Heron Logistics. Thank you. Sylvia." She reached out and patted my hand. Her skin was paper thin. "Be careful. Haley, Arthur was a smart man, but he ended up dead. The people he was dealing with, they don't play by the rules of probate court." I left her house with the wind howling in my ears. Blue Heron Logistics. Another layer. Another puzzle box. That evening, I was at the house, staring at the timeline Marin and I had taped to the wall. The house was quiet, the silence pressing in against the windows. I heard the front door open. I froze. I had changed the locks. But Miranda had a way of bypassing barriers. "Haley?" It was her voice, not the imperious, cold voice she used in court, but the tired, frayed voice of my sister. I walked into the kitchen. Miranda was standing there, leaning against the counter. She looked wrecked. Her perfect hair was loose, strands falling across her face. She was wearing a trench coat over her pajamas. "How did you get in?" I asked. "I still have the garage opener in my car," she said. "You forgot to reset the code." I stood my ground, keeping the island between us. "What do you want?" "Miranda, are you here to inventory the silverware again?" She laughed. A brittle, cracking sound. "The silverware," she muttered. "God, you are so small-minded. Haley, you think this is about spoons? Then tell me what it is about," I said. "Tell me why you are suing me. Tell me why you destroyed the papers in the safety deposit box." She flinched. "You know about that? I know you were there. I know you cleared it out." She looked down at her hands. They were trembling. "I had to," she whispered. "You don't understand. Make me understand," I said. She looked up, and for a moment, her eyes were wide with genuine fear. "They have leverage. Haley, real leverage, not just money. They have things. On me. On Dad." "Who is they?" I asked. "Is it Caldwell? Is it Darius Holt?" "Don't say his name," she hissed, glancing at the window as if he might be listening from the hydrangeas. She took a step toward me. "You need to settle. Haley, take the house. Take the cash. Just sign the trust over. Please, if you don't, it's not going to stop." What isn't going to stop? The machine. She said, they will grind you down. They will ruin your reputation. They will plant things on your computer. They will burn this house down if they have to. You are scared of them. I said, I am terrified of them, she shouted, her voice cracking. And you should be too. You are playing detective, running around with Jonas Sutter, digging up old partnership agreements. You think you are being brave? You are being suicidal. Then help me, I shouted back. If they are threatening you, go to the police. We can fight them together. She looked at me with profound sadness. We can't fight them. Haley, we can only survive them. Dad tried to fight them. Look where he is. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a key. She placed it on the counter. That is the key to the garage, she said. Reset the code, lock the doors, and for God's sake, take the settlement. She turned and walked out. The door clicked shut. I stared at the key. She hadn't come to threaten me. She had come to warn me. She was trapped. You don't understand what he made me do. Darius Holt. The next morning, I went to Elena's office. I told her about the confrontation, leaving out the part about her breaking in. I didn't want Elena to file a police report yet. I needed Miranda to trust me, even a little bit. Elena listened, her pen tapping rhythmically on her desk. She is cracking, Elena said. That is good. But we need hard evidence before we can leverage her fear. She turned her monitor around. I finally got the bank data. She said, not all of it. Miranda's team is still blocking the main accounts, but I got the records for a subsidiary account Arthur used for the property taxes. She pointed to a column of numbers. Look at the deposits. I squinted at the screen. Every month, for the last year, there was a deposit of $5,000. The source? Caldwell Civic Foundation. Now look at the withdrawals. Elena said, within 24 hours of each deposit, the exact same amount was wired out. To where? Holt Strategic Consulting. I sat back. He was laundering money. I said. Elena shook her head. Not him. Through him. Someone was using Arthur's account as a pass-through. They were moving money from the nonprofit foundation to a private consultant, using my father's account to hide the link. Did he know? I asked. Elena pulled up a scanned check. Look at the authorization signature for the wire transfers. I looked. It was the same flat, compressed M I had seen on the caregiving contract. It wasn't Arthur. It was the forger. They were using his accounts without his permission. I said, that is why he was writing those letters. That is why he wanted the audit. He found out they were using him to wash money. And that is why the books on the old development deal were so clean. Elena added, they have been doing this for years, siphoning money out of construction loans and foundations, moving it through shell accounts, and paying off people like Holt. This is massive, I whispered. This isn't just probate. This is racketeering. We need to depose the bank manager. Elena said, we need to find out who physically authorized those wires. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Unknown caller. I looked at Elena. She nodded. Answer it. I put it on speaker. Hello? Haley Morris. The voice was the same as before. Low, distorted. Who is this? I asked. Stop pulling threads, the voice said. I looked at the recording icon on Elena's phone. She was taping it. Why? I asked. What are you afraid I will find? I am not afraid, the voice said. I am warning you. They are done playing nice. They will blame you when it breaks. You will be the one holding the match. The tone wasn't aggressive. It sounded resigned, sad, almost, who will blame me? I asked. Holt? There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy pause. Walk away. Haley. Before the fire starts. The line went dead. Elena stopped the recording. Before the fire starts, she repeated. That is a specific threat, or a metaphor, I said. I don't like metaphors in legal cases, Elena said. I am calling the sheriff to request a patrol car by your house. I left her office feeling a cold prickle on the back of my neck. They will blame you when it breaks. Blame me for what? For the fraud? Were they setting me up to be the fall guy for the money laundering? That afternoon, we were back in court for a status hearing. The atmosphere was brittle. Judge Klein looked even worse than before. His face was gray, his movements jerky. When Elena mentioned the Caldwell Civic Foundation in relation to the bank transfers, Klein dropped his pen. It clattered loudly on the bench. He looked up, and for a second, his eyes darted to the back of the courtroom. I followed his gaze. There was nobody there. Just the empty wooden benches. But he had looked. He was checking. He cleared his throat. "Ms. Park," he said, his voice tight. "You are alleging a direct link between the foundation and the estate?" "Yes, Your Honor. We believe the estate accounts were used to launder funds. That is a serious accusation," Klein said. He was sweating. I could see the sheen on his forehead. "You are venturing into criminal territory. This is a probate court. If the assets were used for criminal enterprise, it affects the validity of the estate," Elena argued. Klein hesitated. He looked trapped. "I will take this under advisement," he stammered. "We will reconvene on Monday." He practically ran off the bench. I turned to Elena. "He knows," I said. "He knows about Caldwell, and he is terrified. The badge. I thought, if Judge Klein sees the badge, he will remember. Whatever history they shared, it was ugly. And Klein was compromised. We have one more stop," Elena said. "Northgate? Why?" "The unit is empty." "Because the manager lied," Elena said. "He said it was accidentally reassigned, but the records show it was terminated by authorized party. Those are two different codes in their system. He slipped up. I want to press him on it, and I want the surveillance footage from the hallway. Even if they overwrote the specific day, I want to see who has been coming and going since." We drove to Northgate Secure Storage as the sun began to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the snow. The nervous clerk wasn't there. Instead, a manager with a thick neck and a hostile stare met us at the counter. "I told you," he said, crossing his arms. "The unit is closed. We don't have footage. The system loops every 48 hours. Ms. Park handed him a piece of paper. "This is a preservation letter," she said. "It puts you on formal notice to preserve all data, logs, and footage related to Unit 404 and the facility entrance. If you delete anything from this moment forward, it is spoliation of evidence. You will be held in contempt of court." The manager read the paper. A muscle in his jaw jumped. "You lawyers think you can just bully people." He spat. "We aren't bullying," I said. "We are looking for the truth. Who cleaned out that unit?" He looked at me with pure venom. "It was empty when we opened it." He lied. "Just dust. Now get out." We walked back to the car. "He is lying," Elena said. "He is terrified. Someone got to him." We drove away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the manager standing in the glass doorway, watching us leave. He pulled a phone from his pocket. I went home. I checked the locks 3 times. I checked the badge in the table leg. I sat in the dark, watching the timeline on the wall. Walk away before the fire starts. I fell asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, a baseball bat leaning against the coffee table. I was woken by the phone ringing. It was Elena. Her voice was shrill, panicked. "Haley, wake up." "What? What is it?" "Turn on the news," she said. I fumbled for the remote. I turned on the local station. Breaking news. A live feed of a fire, towering orange flames licking at the night sky. Fire trucks spraying arcs of water that turned to steam in the freezing air. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, 3-alarm fire at Northgate, secure storage. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. "It's gone," Elena said. "The whole B block, where your father's unit was." I watched the roof collapse in a shower of sparks. "They didn't just delete the footage," I whispered. "They burned the building down. This isn't a legal case anymore." "Haley," Elena said, "these people are arsonists." I hung up. I stood in the flickering light of the television. The warning wasn't a metaphor. They will blame you when it breaks. They burned the evidence. And somewhere, in a police station, a report was probably being filed right now that would point the finger at the disgruntled daughter who had been there just hours before the spark was lit. I wasn't the hunter anymore. I was the prey. I went to the timeline on the wall. I picked up the marker, next to Northgate. I wrote one word in thick, black ink, war. Then I went to the table leg, unscrewed it, and took out the badge. I put it in my pocket. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one, and I was done playing by the rules. The smoke from the Northgate fire hadn't even cleared before the narrative started to shift. The police report, filed with suspicious speed, listed the cause as electrical malfunction due to faulty wiring, just a tragic accident that happened to incinerate the exact row of units where my father had stored his secrets. I sat in Elena's office, watching the local news footage of the twisted metal skeleton that used to be the storage facility. I felt a cold, hard knot in my stomach. They had burned a building to the ground to stop me. Elena turned off the television. Her face was grim. "We cannot prove arson," she said, her voice flat. "And without the surveillance footage, we cannot prove who was there. The physical trail is dead." She swiveled her chair to face her computer. "So we pivot. If they destroyed the destination, we look at the origin. I have subpoenaed the phone logs and digital calendar entries from your father's healthcare provider and his accountant at Briar Glen Tax and Ledger." She handed me a stack of printouts. "We are looking for patterns. Haley. Who was meeting him? Who was calling him?" I scanned the sheets. My father's life and data points, cardiology appointment, prescription refill, 10 a.m. meeting with J. Sutter. Then I saw it. In the visitation log for the rehabilitation center, where he spent 2 weeks recovering from a minor fall last autumn. There was a recurring visitor. Visitor. C. Dane. C. Dane. I said, "That has to be related to Sylvia Dane, the retired paralegal." Elena nodded. "And look at this." She pointed to a darker entry on the calendar from Briar Glen Tax and Ledger. It was dated 3 weeks before he died. Meeting. Arthur Morris/redacted. The redaction wasn't just a black marker line. It was a digital block with a code next to it. Security Protocol 7A. "I have never seen that in a probate discovery," Elena said. "Redactions are usually for social security numbers or medical data. This is an agency-level redaction. It means the person he met with is protected by a specific privacy shield, likely governmental or high-level corporate security." "Who has that kind of protection?" I asked. "Federal agents," Elena said, "or high-level informants, or people working for defense contractors. Darius Holt?" Elena shrugged. "Maybe. If Holt is working as a consultant for entities that require clearance, but it tells us one thing for sure. Arthur wasn't just meeting with local developers. He was in a room with someone who doesn't officially exist in public records." The pressure mounted the next day. Miranda's legal team, sensing that our primary evidence had gone up in smoke, filed a motion for a summary judgment. They argued that I had produced no concrete proof of fraud, only conjecture and delay tactics. Judge Klein granted a hearing. But his patience was clearly eroding. "I am setting a final date," Klein announced, his voice echoing in the courtroom. 2 weeks from today, February 17th, you will present your final arguments and any evidence you have managed to find, if you have nothing but theories. Ms. Park, I will rule in favor of the plaintiff and close this estate. 2 weeks, 14 days to prove a conspiracy that had just burned down a city block." That was when the floor fell out from under me. It wasn't a dramatic collapse. It was a slow, suffocating slide into panic. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last month suddenly evaporated, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. I was in the grocery store, standing in the cereal aisle. I was trying to decide between oatmeal and granola. Simple. Mundane. Suddenly, I couldn't breathe. The fluorescent light seemed to buzz at a frequency that drilled into my teeth. The colors of the cereal boxes blurred into a kaleidoscope of threat. I felt like everyone in the store was watching me. The man stocking the dairy case, the woman with the screaming toddler. Were they with Caldwell? Was that man in the black coat by the entrance the same one from the parking lot? My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. My hands shook so hard I dropped the box of oatmeal. It burst open, scattering oats across the linoleum. I stared at the mess, paralyzed. I couldn't fix it. I couldn't fix anything. I abandoned my cart and ran. I ran out to my car and locked the doors, hyperventilating until spots danced in my vision. I drove to the cemetery. It was the only place where the silence felt real. My father's grave was still fresh, the earth mounded and covered with a spray of winter greenery that was starting to brown. I sat on the frozen ground, not caring about the cold seeping into my jeans. I am tired. Dad, I whispered, I am so tired. I waited for a sign, a wind, a bird, something. There was nothing. Just the gray sky and the granite stones. I felt a numbness spreading through me. Maybe Miranda was right. Maybe I was fighting a war I couldn't win. Maybe the smart thing, the sane thing, was to take the money and go back to Chicago. I could pretend this never happened. I could buy a condo with a view of the lake and forget that my hometown was being eaten alive by a shadow corporation. My phone buzzed. It was Marin. Where are you? Elena is looking for you. I didn't answer. 20 minutes later, Marin's car pulled up the cemetery drive. She didn't ask how I was. She just got out, walked over, and sat down next to me on the dirt. She handed me a thermos cup of coffee. Drink, she said. I took a sip. It was hot and bitter. I think I'm losing my mind. Marin, I said, I had a panic attack over oatmeal. Oatmeal is stressful, Marin said. Too many fiber choices. She put her arm around my shoulders. She was solid, real. You aren't losing your mind. Hales, you are grieving. And you are being gaslit by a multi-million-dollar legal team. If you weren't freaking out, I would be worried. I can't do this. I said, they burned the building. Marin, they are going to hurt someone. They already hurt you, she said fiercely. They stole your father's peace of mind in his last year. Are you going to let them keep it? I looked at the headstone. Arthur Morris, beloved father. No, I said. Then get up, Marin said. Elena called. She got a hit on the C. Dane lead. We met Sylvia Dane at a diner 3 towns over, far away from the prying eyes of Briar Glen. It was a place with sticky vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone honey. Sylvia looked nervous. She kept checking the door every time the bell chimed. I shouldn't be here, she said, clutching her purse. Ms. Dane, I said gently, you are the only one who can help us. You visited my father in rehab. We saw the logs. Sylvia sighed. She ordered a black coffee and didn't touch it. Arthur was a good man. She said, I worked for him, for the firm that represented him, for 20 years. He was honest. That is a rare thing in property law. Why did you go to the rehab center? Elena asked. He called me. Sylvia said. He was frantic. He said he needed to draft a document. But he couldn't trust Harridan and Cole. He couldn't trust the office. He said the walls had ears. She lowered her voice. He gave me a sealed packet. She said, he had written it out by hand on a legal pad. He made me notarize it right there on his bedside table. Where is it? I asked. The Dropbox? Sylvia nodded. I picked it up this morning. After I heard about the fire. I knew it was time. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a thick manila envelope. It was sealed with red security tape. Arthur gave me instructions. He said, Sylvia, if Miranda challenges the will, and if things get ugly, you give this to Haley, but only if you have to. Why did you wait? I asked. Miranda challenged the will weeks ago. Sylvia looked down at her hands. Because I was scared, she whispered. You don't know these people. Haley, the Caldwell Foundation isn't just a charity. It's a front. It's a way for powerful men to move money around without the IRS asking questions. And Miranda. She looked up at me. Her eyes filled with pity. Miranda isn't the villain you think she is. She is a hostage. What do you mean? Arthur told me. Sylvia said, years ago, during that first development deal. Miranda was the project manager. She was young, ambitious. She signed off on the invoices. She didn't know they were padded. She didn't know the contractors were fake. By the time she realized what was happening, her signature was on everything. I felt a chill run down my spine. They blackmailed her. I said, they own her. Sylvia corrected. They told her, you play ball, or you go to prison for fraud. So she played ball. She became their rubber stamp. Arthur found out. That is why he was fighting. He wasn't just trying to save the land. He was trying to buy her way out. He was trying to find enough evidence on them to trade for her freedom. My anger toward my sister fractured, replaced by a complicated, painful sorrow. Miranda wasn't just greedy. She was terrified. You don't understand what he made me do. Sylvia pushed the envelope across the table. Here, she said, I am done. I'm going to visit my sister in Florida for a while. I suggest you don't stay in Briar Glen tonight. She left cash on the table and hurried out. I looked at the envelope. To be opened by Haley Morris. Open it, Elena said. I tore the tape. Inside were 3 things. First, a handwritten memo from my father. To my daughter Haley. It began, If you are reading this, I failed to fix the mess I made. I am sorry. I had to stop reading for a moment to wipe my eyes. The Morris Trust lands are being targeted by the Caldwell Group. They need the waterfront for a shipping logistics hub that bypasses state inspections. They have been using my accounts to funnel payments to Darius Holt. I have traced the flow of money. The account numbers are listed on the attached sheet. I pulled out the second sheet. It was a list of offshore account numbers and routing codes. The hard data Elena had been looking for, but it was the third item that made my blood run cold. It was a small index card. On it, my father had written a single, cryptic instruction. The evidence of the fraud is in the bank transfers. But the leverage, the thing that will stop the judge, is the history. If Judge Klein sees the badge, he will remember. I stared at the words, the badge. I reached into my pocket. I had been carrying the brass star I found in the safety deposit box everywhere I went. I pulled it out and set it on the table between the coffee cups. It was tarnished, heavy, Deputy Sheriff, Briar County. Elena looked at it, then at the note. What does it mean? Elena asked. Was Klein a cop? I don't know, I said, but Dad saved this specific badge. He hid it in a safety deposit box that he knew Miranda would eventually open, but he left the note about it with Sylvia. He split the information so no one person had the whole picture. He wanted me to have the badge. I realized, and he wanted me to know that Klein is compromised. Elena's face was serious. Haley, do not speculate. If you walk into court and accuse a sitting judge of corruption without proof, he will hold you in contempt and throw you in a cell. I am not speculating. I said, my father said Klein would remember. That's not an accusation. That's a trigger. Elena gathered the papers. We need to get this memo into evidence. It is a notarized statement from the decedent alleging fraud. It is admissible. But we have to be careful. If we file this, we are declaring war not just on Miranda, but on the Foundation and on Holt. They already declared war. I said, they burned Northgate. Elena nodded. Okay, I will file an emergency motion to submit new evidence. But Haley, be ready. This is the escalation point. The next 48 hours were a blur of tension. We filed the motion. The court clerk looked at the paperwork like it was a bomb. Then, the offer came. I was at the house, packing a bag. Sylvia was right. I didn't feel safe sleeping there alone anymore. I was going to stay with Marin. My phone rang. It was Miranda. Don't hang up, she said immediately. I stopped, my hand hovering over the end button. What is it? Miranda? I have a new offer, she said. Her voice was shaking. I listened. We are increasing the cash settlement, she said. $300,000, plus the house, plus I will cover your legal fees. $300,000. It was a fortune. It was more money than I had ever seen. Why? I asked. Why the sudden generosity? Because they know you have the memo, Miranda whispered. Sloane told them. She took a ragged breath. Haley, please, take it. Take the money and leave. Go back to Chicago. Travel. Just get away from here. Is that a threat? No, it is a plea. You don't understand who these people are. Darius Holt isn't just a consultant. He fixes things. He cleans up messes. And right now, you are the mess. Her voice cracked. Take it before they make you sorry. Please. I can't. I can't watch you get hurt. I stood there in the silent kitchen. I looked at the timeline on the wall. I looked at the spot where the cash box had been hidden. I realized then that Miranda wasn't negotiating for the estate. She was negotiating for my survival. She was trying to pay me to save my life because she knew she couldn't save me any other way. I felt a surge of pity for her. She was in a cage made of gold and fear. "Miranda," I said softly. "Yes?" Hope flared in her voice. "I can't take it." Silence. "Why?" she cried out. "Why are you so stubborn? It's just land." "Haley, it's just dirt. It's not about the dirt." I said, "It's about what they did to Dad, and what they did to you. I don't matter," she screamed. "You do matter." I said, "You are my sister, and I am not going to let them own us." I heard her sobbing on the other end of the line. A harsh, broken sound. "They are going to destroy you." She whispered, "Let them try." I said. I hung up. I stood there for a long time, the silence ringing in my ears. I had just turned down $300,000 and a safe exit. I had chosen the hard path. I reached into my pocket and touched the badge. I drove to Marin's apartment. I didn't take the main roads. I took the back way, watching the headlights behind me. When I got there, I showed Marin and Elena the badge again. We sat around Marin's kitchen table. "We have the bank numbers." Elena said, "That proves the money laundering." That hits Holt. "But the judge is the gatekeeper. If Klein rules the evidence inadmissible, or if he sides with them to protect himself, we lose. We need to know what this badge means." I said. Marin picked it up. She turned it over. "There is a number stamped on the back." She said, "Badge 44. And look at the pin," she added. "It's bent, and there is a dark stain on the clasp." She looked up at me. "That looks like old blood." "Haley," I felt the room tilt. Arthur kept a badge with blood on it, a badge that would make Judge Klein remember. Klein wasn't just corrupt. He was involved in something violent, a cover-up that went back years. "We are going into that courtroom on Monday," I said, "and we are going to put this badge on the table. It's a gamble," Elena warned, "a massive one. It's the only card we have left," I said. The weekend passed in a haze of preparation. We organized the exhibits, the notarized memo, the carbon copies of the letters, the list of offshore accounts, and the badge, sealed in an evidence bag. I didn't sleep. I lay awake on Marin's sofa, staring at the streetlights on the ceiling. I thought about my father. I thought about the man in the black suit. Wrong person, he had said, but now I was the right person. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of slate. It was snowing, fat wet flakes that clung to the windshield. I dressed carefully, a black suit, white shirt, no jewelry. I wanted to look like armor. We drove to the courthouse. The parking lot was fuller than usual. There were cars I didn't recognize, black SUVs with tinted windows. Elena parked. She looked at me. "Are you ready?" "No." I said. "Good," she said. "Being ready is for people who aren't scared. Being brave is for people who are terrified and do it anyway." We walked up the courthouse steps. The wind whipped my hair across my face. Inside, the hallway was crowded. I saw Sloan Vickers huddled with two men in expensive suits. They weren't local lawyers. They had the sharp, predatory look of city fixers. Miranda was standing apart from them, staring out the window. She looked pale, translucent almost. We entered the courtroom. I took my seat. I placed the evidence bag with the badge on the table in front of me. I covered it with a file folder. Judge Klein entered. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes darting around the room. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a week. He sat down. He didn't bang the gavel. He just looked at us. "This is the final hearing in the matter of the estate of Arthur Morris." He rasped. He looked at Elena. "Call your first witness." Elena stood up. "The defense calls Miranda Morris to the stand." A murmur went through the room. It was a bold move. Calling the opposing party. Miranda stood up. She walked to the witness box. She looked at me. then at the men in the back of the room. She was trembling. She placed her hand on the Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" the clerk asked. Miranda hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the back of the room again. "I do," she whispered. She sat down. Elena walked to the podium. "Ms. Morris," Elena began, "you have alleged that your sister, Haley Morris, exercised undue influence over your father, but is it not true that you were the one exercising influence?" "Objection," Vickers shouted, argumentative, sustained. Klein mumbled. Elena rephrased, "Ms. Morris, did you, or did you not, sign wire transfer authorizations for the Morris Coastal Trust accounts in the months prior to your father's death?" Miranda gripped the railing. I assisted with bill payments. Did those payments include transfers to Holt Strategic Consulting?" Vickers stood up. "Objection. Relevance. This is a probate hearing, not a financial audit." Elena turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this goes to the heart of the estate's value and the motivations behind the will contest. We have evidence that the plaintiff was channeling funds to a third party." "Overruled," Klein said. "Answer the question." Miranda looked trapped. "I did what I was told." She whispered. "Told by whom?" Elena pressed. Miranda didn't answer. She looked at the men in the gallery. Tears began to slide down her face. Elena stepped closer. "Ms. Morris, did you remove items from your father's safety deposit box on January 12th? "Yes," Miranda sobbed. "What did you remove?" "Papers. Just papers." "Did you remove a badge?" The room went silent. Miranda's eyes widened. "No," she said. "I didn't see a badge." Elena walked back to our table. She picked up the evidence bag. She held it up. "Your Honor, the defense would like to introduce Exhibit D, a deputy sheriff's badge, found in the safety deposit box of Arthur Morris." She placed the bag on the judge's bench. Judge Klein looked down. He saw the brass star. He saw the number 44. He saw the dark stain. The color drained from his face so completely that I thought he was having a stroke. He stared at the badge as if it were a venomous snake. His hand went to his throat, loosening his collar. "Where did you get this?" he croaked. "It was in the box," Elena said, "along with a note from the deceased." She placed the copy of the note on the bench. "If Judge Klein sees the badge, he will remember." Klein read the note. His hands started to shake, violent, uncontrollable tremors. He looked up. He wasn't looking at Elena. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the back of the room, at the men in the suits. He looked terrified. I need a recess." He stammered. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "Chambers. Now. Counsel in chambers." He fled the bench, his black robe flapping like the wings of a dying crow. I looked at Elena. She looked at me. "He remembers," I whispered. The doors to the courtroom banged open. The air in the room changed. It became heavy, charged with static. I turned around. A man was walking down the center aisle. He was tall, wearing a black suit that absorbed the light. He moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. It wasn't the security guard from the parking lot. It was someone else, someone with authority etched into the lines of his face. He held up a badge of his own, not a sheriff's badge, federal. He walked right past Sloan Vickers. He walked right past Miranda. He stopped in front of the empty bench. He looked at the door where the judge had fled. Then he turned and looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. "Ms. Morris," he said. His voice was calm, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. I stood up. "Yes?" He looked at the evidence bag on the judge's desk. "You have made quite a mess," he said. "Is that a threat?" I asked, my voice trembling but loud. "No," he said. "It is an observation." He turned to the courtroom. "Nobody leaves," he announced. The doors at the back of the room clicked shut. 2 uniformed officers stood in front of them. The man in the black suit turned back to me. "My name is Agent Thorne," he said, "and we need to talk about what you found in that box." The world narrowed down to the man, the badge, and the empty judge's chair. I had pulled the thread, and now The ceiling was coming down. The snow had turned to a freezing rain that lashed against the tall, arched windows of the Bryan County Probate Court. Inside, the radiator pipes hissed and clanked, struggling against the pervasive chill. It was the final hearing day. The docket simply read, "Estate of Arthur Morris," but everyone in the room knew it was something else entirely. The courtroom, usually sparsely populated by bored clerks and grieving widows, was packed to capacity. I sat at the defense table, my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles were white. Elena Park sat beside me, organizing her files with a terrifying precision. She didn't look nervous. She looked like a surgeon preparing to cut. Behind me, the gallery hummed with whispers. I could feel the eyes of the town on the back of my neck. They were there for the spectacle, the Morris girls, tearing each other apart over a few acres of scrubland and a Victorian house, but scattered among the familiar faces of neighbors and shopkeepers were others I didn't know. Men in charcoal suits who didn't look like they belonged in Briar Glen. They sat in the back row, silent, watching with the detached intensity of sharks circling a life raft. Miranda sat at the plaintiff's table. She looked thinner than she had even a week ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back so severely it pulled at the skin of her temples. She wore a high-necked black dress that looked less like couture and more like mourning garb. She wouldn't look at me. She stared straight ahead at the empty judge's bench, her jaw set in a rigid line. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. The Honorable Raymond Klein entered from his chambers. He moved slowly, almost shuffling. His face was the color of old putty, and there were dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He climbed the steps to the bench and sat down heavily, not meeting anyone's gaze. He didn't bang the gavel. He just shuffled the papers in front of him. "We are here to conclude the matter of the Morris estate," Klein said, his voice raspy. "We have heard the preliminary arguments. Today, we will hear final testimony and review the submitted evidence. I intend to issue a ruling before this court adjourns today." He looked up then, his eyes darting briefly to the back of the room where the strangers in suits sat. A flicker of fear passed over his face, quick as a heartbeat, before he masked it with judicial annoyance. "Ms. Park," he said, "you may proceed." Elena stood up. "The defense calls Miranda Morris to the stand." Miranda stood. She walked to the witness box, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. The sound echoed in the silence. She took the oath in a voice that was barely a whisper. Elena approached the stand. She didn't hold any papers. She just stood there, looking at my sister. "Ms. Morris," Elena began, her voice conversational. "You have petitioned this court to invalidate your father's final will and testament based on the claim that he was mentally incompetent and under undue influence. Is that correct?" "Yes," Miranda said. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. "And you claim that you were the primary caregiver and financial manager for your father in his final year?" I paid his bills. I managed his appointments." Elena nodded. "And in the course of managing his finances, did you ever encounter the name Caldwell Civic Foundation?" The air in the courtroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Miranda flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of the shoulders. "But I saw it. I believe I saw it on some mail." Miranda said, "It is a local charity." "A charity," Elena repeated. "And did you, in your capacity as financial manager, authorize monthly wire transfers of $5,000 from your father's property trust account to this charity?" Miranda hesitated. She looked at Sloane Vickers, her attorney. Vickers was staring at her papers, refusing to make eye contact. "I paid many bills," Miranda said. "My father supported many causes." Elena walked back to our table and picked up a document. It was the printout of the bank transfers we had uncovered. "Ms. Morris, I have here a record of 12 transfers. They were not donations. They were listed as consulting retainers. They were sent to an account linked to the Caldwell Civic Foundation, and then immediately routed to a secondary entity known as Holt Strategic Consulting." Elena stepped closer to the witness box. "Did your father authorize these payments?" Miranda gripped the railing of the witness box. Her knuckles were white. He knew about the business. She said, "That is not what I asked," Elena said sharply. "Did Arthur Morris sign the authorizations, or did you?" Miranda's composure began to fracture. Her lower lip trembled. "I was handling his affairs. It was part of the management." Elena held up the second document, the blow-up of the signature card from the safety deposit box, and the safety deposit box at Red Harbor Federal Bank. Elena said, "You accessed it on January 12th, 3 days after your father died. You testified previously that you removed only family letters." "Yes," Miranda whispered. "But we have a witness," Elena said, bluffing beautifully, "who claims the box contained financial ledgers that would prove the estate was being used to launder money for the Caldwell Foundation. Where are those ledgers?" "Miranda?" "Objection." Sloan Vickers shot up. "Calls for speculation. There is no proof such ledgers existed." "Overruled," Judge Klein said, though his voice lacked conviction. He was sweating. He kept glancing at the clock. "Miranda," Elena said, dropping her voice to a compassionate register, "we know you didn't start this. We know you were put in a position where you had to make choices. But your father left a memo that details exactly how the money was moved." Miranda's eyes went wide. She looked at me. It was a look of pure, terrified desperation. "He wrote it down?" she whispered. "He did," Elena said. "He wrote it down to protect you. He knew you were trapped." Miranda let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. "Trapped," she repeated. "You have no idea. Tell the court." "Miranda," Elena said, "tell us the truth. Did you forge your father's signature on the wire transfers?" Miranda looked at the back of the room. The men in the charcoal suits were staring at her. Stone-faced, unblinking. She looked back at Judge Klein. He was staring at his hands. I had to," Miranda stammered. The tears spilled over. "Why?" Elena pressed. "Why did you have to?" "Because they said they would ruin him," Miranda shouted. Her voice cracked, shrill and broken. "They said the development deal was upside down. They said if I didn't help them move the money, they would file charges against Dad for embezzlement. They said they would take the house. They said they would take everything." She was sobbing now, her body shaking. "I did what I was told," she screamed. "I just did what I was told." The courtroom erupted. People gasped. Reporters in the front row started scribbling furiously. Sloan Vickers sat with her head in her hands. Judge Klein banged his gavel. "Order! Order in this court!" He looked terrified. The testimony had gone off the rails. The genie was out of the bottle. Elena waited for the noise to die down. "No further questions," she said softly. Miranda slumped in the chair. Burying her face in a handkerchief, Elena turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense moves to submit the decedent's sealed memorandum into evidence. This memo, combined with the witness's admission of coercion and forgery, proves that the contest of the will is fraudulent. It proves that the plaintiff is acting under duress from external parties, specifically the Caldwell Civic Foundation and Darius Holt." She placed the sealed packet and the notarized memo on the bench. Judge Klein stared at the papers. He didn't touch them. He looked like a man standing on a ledge. If he accepted the evidence, he was declaring war on the powerful interests sitting in the back of his courtroom. If he rejected it, he was committing judicial malpractice in front of 100 witnesses. He cleared his throat. The admission of the witness is noted." Klein stammered. "However, the allegations regarding the Caldwell Foundation they are hearsay. We have no direct evidence of this extortion." He was backtracking. He was trying to find a way out. "Ms. Park," he continued, his voice gaining a desperate strength, "while the witness's emotional state is regrettable, the fact remains that she is the co-signer on the accounts. Legally, she had the right to move those funds. The claim of coercion is substantiated only by her own outburst. And this memo." He picked up the memo Arthur had written. "This is an unverified document," he said. "It makes wild accusations against respected community organizations." He was going to bury it. I could feel it. He was going to rule that Miranda was stressed but authorized, and that the memo was just the ramblings of a sick old man. "I am inclined," Judge Klein said, looking straight at Sloane Vickers, "to view this as a family dispute that has spiraled out of control, without concrete evidence of criminal intent by third parties. This court cannot entertain conspiracy theories." He reached for his gavel. "I am ready to rule on the motion to dismiss the defense's claim," he said. My heart stopped. He was doing it. He was looking at the badge, which was still sitting on his desk from the previous session, covered by a folder, and he was choosing to ignore it. He was choosing safety over truth. I looked at Elena. She looked stricken. We had played our ace, and the house was cheating. Klein raised the gavel. At that exact moment, the double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open, they swung wide with a heavy, authoritative thud that silenced the room instantly. Every head turned. A man stood in the doorway. He was tall, wearing a black suit that was cut sharper than the local lawyer's attire. He wore a long wool coat open over it. He didn't look like a spectator. He looked like an event. He walked down the center aisle. He didn't rush. His footsteps on the parquet floor were heavy, deliberate, and rhythmic. Clack, clack, clack. The men in the charcoal suits in the back row turned to look at him. I saw them stiffen. One of them reached for a phone, but the man in the aisle didn't even look at them. He walked past the bar. He walked past Miranda, who was still weeping in the witness box. He walked past me. He stopped directly in front of the judge's bench. Judge Klein froze. The gavel hovered in midair, trembling. His face went from gray to a stark, bloodless white. The man reached into his coat pocket. The bailiff stepped forward, hand on his belt. But the man simply held up a leather wallet and flipped it open. A gold badge glinted under the courtroom lights. Not a sheriff's star, a federal shield. "Special Agent Thorne," the man said. His voice was a deep baritone that carried to the back of the room without shouting. "Department of Justice, Financial Crimes Division." He closed the wallet and placed it back in his pocket. Judge Klein lowered the gavel slowly, setting it down as if it were made of glass. "Agent Thorne," Klein whispered, "this is a closed probate hearing." "It is no longer a probate hearing," Thorne said calmly. He placed a thick sealed envelope on the judge's bench, right on top of Arthur's memo. "This is a federal notice of seizure and an emergency stay of proceedings," Thorne announced. "It pertains to the assets of the Morris Coastal Trust, the Caldwell Civic Foundation, and all associated entities." He turned slightly, acknowledging the room for the first time. "As of this morning, the accounts in question are frozen subject to an active federal investigation into wire fraud, money laundering, and racketeering." A murmur rippled through the crowd, growing louder until it was a dull roar. Thorne leaned forward, placing his hands on the bench. He spoke quietly, but in the pin-drop silence near the front. I heard every word. "Your Honor," he said, "we have been monitoring the transaction logs for 6 months. We have the letters Arthur Morris sent to the compliance office, and we have the digital footprint of the individual who accessed the Northgate storage records using a falsified warrant." Klein flinched as if he had been slapped. "A falsified warrant?" Klein croaked. "Signed by a judge of this county." Thorne said. He let the words hang there. "Signed by a judge of this county." Klein looked at the badge on the table, the old deputy badge with the blood stain. Then he looked at Thorne. He remembered. Arthur Morris had known. He had known that Klein was the one who signed the paper that let them burn the evidence. He knew Klein was the one who had buried the bodies years ago. The blood drained from Klein's face completely. He looked like a man having a heart attack. "Clear the courtroom," Klein rasped. He stood up, knocking his chair over. "I said clear the courtroom. Now." The bailiffs moved in, ushering the confused and excited spectators out. The reporters were shouting questions. The men in the charcoal suits in the back row didn't wait to be told. They slipped out the side exit, disappearing like smoke. Miranda was led off the stand and sat next to Sloane Vickers, who looked like she was trying to become invisible. When the room was empty except for the lawyers, the parties, and the agent, Thorne spoke again. "Judge Klein," he said, "you are named in the warrant regarding the authorization of the Northgate access. Klein slumped against the back wall of the dais. I didn't know, he stammered. They told me it was a routine request. Ignorance is a defense for the jury, Thorne said coldly. Not for the bench. Thorne pulled a single sheet of paper from his folder and placed it on the defense table in front of me. Ms. Morris, he said. I looked up at him. He had eyes like flint. This is a forensic analysis of the caregiving contract and the wire transfer authorizations, he said. I looked at the paper. Conclusion: high probability of forgery. The signature of Arthur Morris shows signs of digital manipulation and tracing. It wasn't Miranda. I realized Miranda had signed her name on the bank box, but someone else, someone professional, had forged Dad's name on the contracts that started this whole mess. Thorne turned back to the judge. We are taking custody of the evidence, Thorne said. All of it. The memo, the bank records, and the badge. Klein stared at the badge. Take it, he whispered. Just take it. Thorne picked up the evidence bag containing the brass star. He looked at it for a moment, then looked at me. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. Wrong person. He had said in the parking lot. He had been protecting me. He had been waiting for me to flush them out. I was the bait. Thorne turned to the room. Judge Klein is recusing himself from this matter effective immediately, Thorne stated. He wasn't asking. Klein nodded weakly. Yes, I am recusing. I am compromised. The matter of the Morris estate is hereby transferred to the Federal District Court, pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Thorne continued. All assets are frozen. The land cannot be sold. The money cannot be moved. He looked at Miranda. Ms. Morris, you will be required to give a formal statement to my office tomorrow morning. Do not leave the state. Miranda nodded. Tears streaming down her face. She looked small and broken, but for the first time in months. She didn't look terrified. The monster she feared had been named. Thorne looked at me. You pulled the thread. Ms. Morris, he said. I stood up. My legs felt shaky. Is it over? I asked. Thorne allowed himself a grim smile. The probate case is over. The criminal case is just beginning. But the land is safe for now. Nobody is building anything on that waterfront while the DOJ is tearing their books apart. He turned and walked out, his coat billowing behind him. The silence he left behind was heavy. Judge Klein disappeared into his chambers without a word. I knew I would never see him on that bench again. Elena let out a long, shuddering breath. My God, she whispered. I looked across the aisle. Miranda was sitting alone. Sloane Vickers had packed her bag and fled the moment the agent said, criminal investigation. I walked over to the plaintiff's table. Miranda looked up at me. Her mascara was smeared. Her eyes red and swollen. Haley, she whispered. I didn't say anything. I just reached out and took her hand. It was cold. They are going to indict me, she said. I helped them. You were a hostage. I said, we will prove it. Arthur wrote it down. He saved you. Miranda, he spent his last year building a lifeboat for you. She squeezed my hand, and then she broke down completely, sobbing into her arms on the mahogany table. I stood there, looking at the empty judge's bench. I hadn't won, not really. I didn't have the inheritance money. I didn't have clear title to the house yet. The trust was frozen, likely for years. While the government dissected the corpse of the Caldwell Foundation, I was broke. I was exhausted. My family name was about to be dragged through a federal scandal, but as I walked out of the courthouse into the freezing rain, I felt a strange lightness in my chest. I stopped on the steps and took a deep breath of the cold, clean air. The man in the black suit had come. The judge had frozen. The truth had been told. Even when it hurt, I took the timeline out of my bag, the folded piece of butcher paper where I had written war. I crumpled it up and tossed it into a trash can. I walked to my car. I had to go pick up Marin. We had a lot of work to do, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Thank you so much for listening to My Wealthy Sister Demanded My Inheritance in Court. This story was a journey into the dark corners of family secrets and the lengths a father will go to protect his children. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a small town like Briar Glen or a big city like Chicago? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed Haley's fight for the truth, please hit that subscribe button to join the Revenge Stories community. We have many more tales of justice, betrayal, and redemption coming your way. Share your thoughts on Miranda's choice. Do you think she can be redeemed? Until next time, keep your eyes open, and remember, sometimes the truth is the only weapon you have left.